We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series, and today we're looking at the third best team from the NHL's regular season, the Colorado Avalanche. They could be big players between free agency and trades. What moves will we expect from them this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we're continuing on with our offseason plan series today, looking at the Colorado Avalanche. So we're going to recap their season from 1920, take a look at what they have for cap space, expiring contracts, and discuss what moves we expect to see them make this offseason to get back at it and ready for next year to have another shot at hopefully contending again for a Stanley Cup. We saw them have a pretty good playoff run this year, and it only can help for bigger and better things for them moving forward. So let's start by recapping the 1920 NHL season for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, as you can see on the screen here, they had a solid record, 42-20-8 for 92 points. The Avalanche ended up having a pretty solid playoff run and ended up falling to the Dallas Stars, but obviously they still had nothing to be ashamed of. They had a terrific year, and overall the Avalanche are one of the up-and-coming teams to watch out for in the next few seasons. Now, as we can take a look here at the team statistics, you can see they scored 237 goals while only allowing 191, so they were plus 46. That's really solid. They can score with the best of them, and they can defend well and had good goaltending this year as well. The power play was only okay, 19.1% for 19th best, and the PK was pretty solid, 13th best in the NHL, 81.4%. So overall, they had a really good year. Now, let's take a look at their cap space, followed by expiring contracts. They have a lot of interesting things to take a look at this offseason that could lead to a lot of moves in a very busy time for GM Joe Sakic. Now, as you can see from CapFriendly.com, they currently have $22.3 million in cap space, but they only have 14 players under contract, so they do have a fair bit of players that they need to sign or replace for next year, and that $22 million sounds like a lot, but they do have some big-time players looking for their next contracts coming out of their ELCs soon, like, for example, Cale Makar, Gabriel Landeskog, and Nathan MacKinnon do not have a lot of turnover on their deals as well, so they do need to be careful here from a long-term basis, but they do have some short-term flexibility on how they can make this team better. Now let's take a look at the contract situation. Who are the pending restricted and unrestricted free agents for the Avalanche? Now, looking at the list of RFAs, they have some players here that are, reasonably significant, and we'll see some movement here, I think, within this group for sure. We have Valeri Nichushkin, Tyson Jost, Vladislav Kamenev, Andrei Burakovsky, defenseman Ryan Graves, and Nikita Zadorov. Now, out of those RFAs, I do expect a fair bit of them to be back and return. There's a lot of talk that Zadorov's going to be traded, but Graves and Burakovsky for sure. I can see them coming back. Same with Nichushkin on probably another shorter-term contract, but I can see him having some value there. Tyson Jost is another player who could find himself traded as well. That would not be shocking. On the UFA front, we have defenseman Kevin Connauton, veteran forwards Matt Nieto, Colin Wilson, and Vladislav Nemestikov. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Avalanche have already indicated here that Connauton and Wilson will definitely not be back. I think it's possible that the other two guys could be considered for new contracts, but at this point, looking like they're headed for a free agency and could certainly explore other options as well. So now let's take a look at what are the top burning questions for the Avalanche. What are the big moves we need to see from them this offseason? Well, first up, there's certainly rumored to be heavy hitters in free agency considering a short-term expensive contract for a guy like Taylor Hall. They can certainly bring in a player like him, like I said, as long as they don't sign him too long-term to kind of complicate things for their other players who are going to need deals here in a couple of years' time. They could throw a lot of money at a player like Hall on a short-term basis to kind of put them over the top to add another offensive weapon to really help them in another deep playoff run. Essentially, they're in win-now mode. I mean, their window to win is going to be open for a long time because a lot of their top talent are still relatively young, still only, not even at their peak yet. However, because of that, their contracts are going to get more expensive as they come out of their entry-level deals and into their next contract. So they're going to have less cap flexibility in a couple of years' time than they have now. So they need to try to win now before they end up with a situation like we see in Tampa or the previous Stanley Cup winners, where they kind of need to start to dismantle after being successful in winning the Cup. Because with all that success, players need raises and are going to get more money on the open market, and you just can't keep everybody together too long term in that case. So Could they go shopping for a big-time player like Hall, or certainly rumored to be considering that? By no means is there a guarantee that they do, but the option's there, and I would not be surprised to see GM Joe Sakic be very aggressive in that regard. Now, as I mentioned, we could see some of their RFAs traded. It is highly likely and rumored that guys like Nikita Zadorov and Tyson Jost will find themselves on the trade board this offseason. They could find themselves wearing different uniforms next year. I mean, as we've seen here with the Avalanche, they have flexibility, but they could use even more flexibility. But Zadorov's a player who's had a lot of rumors around him for quite some time, so it wouldn't be shocking to see that done. But they've already got some players under contract on the back end longer term. They got Cale Makar still in his ELC. And I think longer term here, they need to find room for guys like Bowen Byram as well, who's certainly going to be a big part of that blue line. He's not even in the mix yet. So that's going to be part of it. But it looks though Zadorov and Jost could find themselves on the move. Jost is a player who came out of junior with a lot of potential. Hasn't really fully realized that, but he's, could get more of an opportunity in another team that's not so quite highly stacked in the forward group, so ahead of him. So we'll see what happens with Jost as a player. I would not be surprised to see be traded this offseason. Now, could the Avalanche make some changes in goal? I think it's fair to say that Grubauer and Francouz gave them pretty good goaltending last year, but as we've seen in the playoffs as well, it could stand to be a little bit better. And there's been some talk they've been linked to a guy like Matt Murray in Pittsburgh. Joe Sakic was rumored to be looking at him in the past last year. Didn't get a deal done, obviously, but there is quite a speculation they could try to move on from Grubauer and find another goaltender to be the starter longer term, like a guy like Murray or something comparable, because there's plenty of goalies on the goaltending carousels, we're calling it this year, between the trade market and the free agent market. All kinds of options that the Avalanche could be looking at, and they, like many teams, are rumored to be looking to make an upgrade. Now, of course, not everybody can upgrade if everybody's changing teams, but at some point here, it's highly suspected that they could explore that, and it would not be surprising to see a guy like Grubauer moved out and another player brought in like a Murray or something comparable to upgrade between the pipes so they can have that solidified for the longer term. Now, as I mentioned, they have some younger players that they could try to find spots for on the team longer term as well, so that they can kind of balance things out cap-wise. So we're looking at guys like Bowen Byram, Connor Tibbins, Martin Kaut, for example. So we could see them take on bigger roles. I mean, obviously, throughout this offseason, we might see some roster adjustments that kind of make spots for them. We could also see defenseman Cale Makar possibly get an extension as well. So that'll be interesting to see what kind of money he's looking at for his next deal, whether or not it's going to be a bridge deal or a long-term deal. I would think with everything going on with the state of the financial issues in the NHL because of the COVID shutdown, I would think we're going to see more players take more bridge deals so they can hopefully cash in sooner when things rebound, hopefully in a few years' time when we start to see the NHL salary cap start to go back up. But regardless of what Joe Sakic and the Avalanche do, they're going to be a very competitive team. I have a lot of faith in this group to continue getting better, and if they make a few small additions here, whether it be an upgrade in goal, adding another offensive piece, but I do think it's fair to say that if they add a scorer like Taylor Hall or look to make a goaltending upgrade, that could be enough to get them from where they were in the playoffs to be a contender for the Western Conference Championship and possibly even a Stanley Cup next year. Like, they're not that far away. They're only another piece or two from getting themselves over the top to be real serious Cup contenders. I know many people thought going into the playoff system this year with the way it was structured that they would be a team to watch out for. And they went quite far, but not quite far enough to get that Stanley Cup. So we'll see if they can do it next year. So let me know your thoughts on what you expect from the Avalanche, and we'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.